K-State Culturally is virtual programming centered on celebrating, uplifting, and educating the Wildcat community through the lens of communities of color who are affiliated and connected to Kansas State University. Well, welcome to K-State Culturally. This is a series of virtual programming that will be centered on celebrating, uplifting, and educating the Wildcat community through the lens of communities of color affiliated with K-State. My name is Jessica Elmore, and I work for the K-State Alumni Association as the Associate Director for Diversity Programs. And today I am so excited because I have two people that I've been waiting to talk to today. That is Jael Whitney. She is the North American Business Development Leader for Artificial Intelligence Application for IBM, K-State alum. And then we have Dr. Bill Hsu, who is a K-State full professor for the Carl Ice College of Engineering Computer Science Department. And he's actually the person who's been teaching me and educating me about artificial intelligence. So we have them both here today, and I think our conversation is going to be awesome. So just, welcome to both of you. How are you both doing today?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Great.
Same here. Thank you.
Good. Well, I think my first question would be like, Jael, how did you become a part of artificial intelligence? Like, what's your background? What's your story?
Yeah, definitely ties into what we're talking about today. So I only recently graduated from K-State. I graduated in May of 2018. And prior to that, I was involved with the American Indian Science and Engineering Society at K-State. And the thing that was really cool about that was that I was a marketing student, and it was just so happened that the multicultural engineering program was generous enough to let me be a part of that student organization and go to the national conferences with them. And it was there that I met IBM and got the job that I have today.
So I do research in machine learning, and I'm very interested in applications of artificial intelligence, machine learning, including deep learning and data science, to different areas of science, engineering, and industries, different industries, including business and the humanities. So because I do a lot of interdisciplinary outreach and we work with people from all walks of life, I tried to be conscious of inclusion and belonging, as well as diversity and equity, in looking at the future of AI and some of the issues that have been raised by a lot of researchers and experts in our field about bias and its consequences in AI have led me to take a greater interest and want to learn more about ethics in society. And so there's an actual conference devoted to artificial intelligence, ethics in society, and one devoted to fairness, accountability, and transparency in machine learning and other AI areas. And both of these have raised very important issues about the repercussions of technology, and also how we can make sure that stakeholders are aware of those repercussions and have a seat at the table in policymaking. So that's something I've tried to engage my students and my colleagues.
So tell me more about, like, just when we think about communities of color, like, I know from my situation, when I hear about artificial intelligence, I hear about driverless cars, facial recognition, and that there's this bias. Like, what should like a layman person know about this?
So I think, sorry, Giles, did you want to answer first?
Oh, I'll just kind of bring my personal perspective to that. I am coming from the sort of indigenous lens, and so in the field of AI, there is this kind of bias towards using Western models to approach AI and how we understand it. And so even just from that perspective, thinking about how this technology will impact my community, how can we see a symbiotic relationship with this technology? Those are the kinds of questions that I think about. And the other thing that's cool that I've been able to be a part of recently. So as a part of the Native American Council at IBM, we're also thinking about these issues. And so I'm working with one of our scientists now to craft a presentation for the ACES National Conference conference that talks about Indigenous AI and how those models will affect us and how we can use them to our benefit.
Thank you, Jael.
Yeah, thank you.
I think in terms of the concrete consequences of bias, the things that are in the spotlight involve policing, involve privacy, they involve a lot of intersectional issues and a lot of cross-cutting issues. And what I think those of us who work in this area need to be mindful of and attentive to are the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color who actually have expertise and also lived experience about these consequences. And so there's this narrative about a model is only good as the data that trained it. That's the engineer's motto or creed about, and it's that narrative has some harms as well. That narrative has a downside, which is what is the intrinsic bias in terms of who developed this model, for what purpose was this model developed, what are some of the structural influences that led to the development of this model. So it isn't, if you look at the history of film and the spectra of skin colors that are represented in film, those are things that carry forward to webcams today, but those predate data sets. Those predate those biases, those influence of bias predate the actual development of these visual corpora that are used for training in vision systems. If something predates the development of those corpora, then it also isn't just fixed if you shift the representation of persons pictured in the training images. Right? So that's an example. That's a concrete example of where I see these debates that happen on Twitter, and there's been a lot of Twitter controversy, as I've shown a couple of both of you, and tried to share with my colleagues. And I'm very proud of the unity in voices and the diversity of voices that has come out of this. But like every online debate, there is a predominance of certain voices, and there's definitely bias in that conversation too.
So, what I've learned from you, Dr. Xu, is that we're in the building phase of like this brain, right? And I think at the IBM is called Watson. Is that what it's called or something?
Yep, Watson. Yep.
Okay. See, I've been doing a little learning. And what I keep thinking to myself is, if we're in the place of building the brain, what do we as people of color, how do we get to be a part of that? Like, what does a job look like doing that? How do you get involved? I mean, if I'm a young student, maybe not in college yet, like, can I participate? If I'm a young alum, how can I be a part? Because I agree that once the brain is built, it's going to be so hard to like root out the bias. So how do we get to be a part now?
Yeah, I can tackle that first. So for me, that came mostly from being involved with a community for my particular identity that was involved in this area. So having that support group where I was able to explore that interest and have resources available was super important. For younger students, I think being curious and looking for if there are any opportunities offered from your school, from your local library, any local community organization focused on STEM, just to explore and play around. I think having that attitude of curiosity is like the main thing that will bring you success in this field.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think for us, engagement is outreach, and a combination of that with education, basic education. So I try to bring up and pose issues in courses, but to try to teach my students to be listeners, and we also try to engage students in having them pose questions, encouraging them to feed that curiosity, not just in reading and classroom instruction, but in our club, we make sure that students get a chance to ask our outside speakers questions, and have roundtable kind of discussions, so that everyone is actually everyone who's present gets a voice. The way I've tried to encourage that is by raising the profile and visibility of these issues, because I think that education often lags, and certainly demand from the student body can lag opportunities and risks. So you have opportunities and risks that are already there in the market, in the deployed systems, in the last generation of deployed systems, and in the biases that creep into re-engineering and redesign. So in those senses, we say, okay, here are the issues in the systems of today. If you're going to be part of building the systems of tomorrow, part of this is, what does a job interview look like right now? How can, what is your voice? You know, there's a cartoon that has a black woman sitting in front of a panel of 10 white men, and one of them is saying, explain what you can contribute or what you can bring to this company. And they all have poses in different levels of skepticism and shock, right? Their body language is like that. And that's an extreme visualization of something that actually I've seen in so-called roundtables that aren't diversity workshops, but are sort of, okay, we're going to have the future of work at the AI for Social Good conference in Switzerland. Who got to go to Switzerland? Who got to go to, right, the fact that this might overlap with Davos and, you know, other kinds of things. Who's in that space already? Who understands the economic impact? Who's invested? Who is already empowered by the vested interest of moneyed corporations and other moneyed interests in these things? And who's driving change in organizations, including Amazon, IBM, and so on, in terms of, okay, you know, what's going to give a company the push to make a decision for global good about facial recognition and things like that.
What's interesting about that, because when I think about it, I'm like, okay, so do I have to be like super good in math and, you know, science? And I remember Dr. Shu, when we went to that conference, one of the speakers was like, everybody needs to have some kind of experience or something within this field because it's going to be so vast. And so I was like thinking about that. I'm like, what does that look like? And as you're talking about the people who are at the table, how do they know about the economic aspect, or do they have the experience within the community? So then I say to myself, as a community person who focuses on diversity work, how do I fit into that space if I'm not going to be a traditional, and I don't even know what the term would be, but whatever, you know, a person who's developing artificial intelligence or whatever, how do I get at the table and bring myself there? Like, what does that look like? Is there a job description? Is there an organization? I wouldn't know how to insert myself if I didn't come from computer science or some STEM background. What are your thoughts?
I've been trying to learn from some of the books that you recommended to me, and one of them is Eduardo Bonilla Silva's Racism Without Racists, and talking about sort of what are structural racism, what are the influences of structural racism inherent in word of mouth networks, where you see your peers represented, where you see your community and your culture represented, and your ethnic background represented in hiring, in placement, in mentorship, and definitely in the experts at the table. And so recently, yesterday, I saw the fantastic news that Rediet Abebe, one of the two founders of Black in AI, she and Timnit Gebru founded Black in AI. She won the ACM Doctoral Dissertation of the Year Award. And that was really just wonderful news. And you know, in terms of visibility, she's starting tenure track at Berkeley this year. She talks about how she gets a thrill of you know, big smile when she thinks about how she gets to mentor the next generation. I told her the day she announced her accepting the offer from UC Berkeley. Berkeley is lucky to have you, and I really mean that. They're really lucky to have her. Not every university can have a Timnit or a Rediet or one of the many founders of Latinx in AI, Black in AI, in machine learning, querying AI, and so on. So in terms of seeing your own community represented, that's a start, but there's definitely a sort of chicken and egg problem there. So we try to be there in the gap, but that gap is hard to close. That gap is hard. It's not feasible for us who are still learning to always leap. So Jael, you may have been at Society of Women Engineers the time I came to talk about scholarship opportunities. But I remember the one thing I've mentioned to Dr. Elmore and to Laverne, the one thing that sort of struck me was the women who looked up were all computer scientists. And I had to keep on sort of waving this is a CS society, but it's not, it's for all STEM students. You're not disqualified, and your chances are not sort of minimized if you are a mechanical engineer, if your interests align. And it's about, though, how do you develop that expertise? How do you get up to that level of math? What should you be taking? Because there's no roadmap. There's no, our best tracks and our best technical advising cannot take the place of a true mentor who has lived experience and professional experience in the field. So having served lately as a mentor for Latinx in AI, I'm realizing what some of the barriers to entry, as Dr. Elmore has been teaching me about, actually look like from the South American side. And that's things like, oh, last week I had a low bandwidth connection, so I couldn't watch your lectures, even though you let me into Canvas. I went and paid twice as much. Now I have a high enough bandwidth to actually stream the media site stuff, and I knew to guess that might be an issue. But as an American, we're taught that, oh, South Korea has so much more bandwidth than us, right? So we think of our internet as average or slow. It's not in the whole world. In the whole world, it's still sort of on this side of the distribution, even though it's slower, it's not the fastest compared to other similarly economically developed countries, but it's all relative. So that's just an example, but
yeah. And going off of that theme of you don't know what you don't know, for me, one of the things that was extremely helpful was to get involved in online communities. Just even Googling like Indigenous AI, looking on Twitter for people that are having those conversations and that have, they're women in AI or they're Indigenous in AI. Going to those online communities, following those people and listening to what they're saying really helped me to start to learn some of the terminology and where I needed to look next to get involved and kind of what I needed to stay abreast of. So that's something that's really easy to do and super easy to learn from. And it's fun. It's fun to see these communities and how excited they are about these topics, like the positive side of things. I think that's really helpful too.
That is so awesome. Thank you both. I'm just thinking about, it's like, who am I going to follow now? Because I feel like, if you don't have the terminology, like you just feel so lost in that. And I'm really glad, Dr. Shu, that, you're able to see those barriers of entry because, once you're in that space, that whole idea of like, do I belong? And when you don't have the sense of belonging, it's hard to really kind of press your way through when it does get challenging, because I believe it would be challenging. So I think that's probably why you have the Indigenous group for the IBM. It's like a community, of support. So those are really, really great. Let's talk about the future of work. So there's this thing of like, machines are going to take all of our jobs or whatever. But when I was thinking about it, and I was just like, well, I mean, some of them, yes, but what I've been learning about artificial intelligence, it's like, it's actually higher level type jobs like finance and, things like that. So as a college graduate, as a person who's working with college students and they're getting these majors, it's like, will that be there when you graduate? And especially when it comes to communities of color, we find ourselves sometimes thought about after, like, but that impact is so large. Like, what should we be thinking about in the community when we talk about future of work? Should we be scared? Should we be excited? Should we be advising our students who are coming up? about, you know, beefing up their experience or taking interest? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can start. So I would say technology is always disruptive, but it's not always destructive. And I think there is a lot of fear mongering around AI, especially, and there will be jobs that will change the way that they look, but there will be new opportunities created at the same time, new types of work. And I think at the end of the day, technology is intended to be symbiotic and reciprocal. And so if we can have that attitude of like mutual respect towards the technology that is making a lot of lives a lot easier at the same time, I think that'll help to, you know, deal with some of the fear. In terms of what will that mean for my career, that's going to be very, very different depending on what industry you're going into. If you are going into finance, you're going to want to research, how is AI impacting my industry? Because then you'll be able to talk about it in job interviews, and you'll be able to say, here's how I've skilled myself, here's where I've built understanding. And that way they'll see, okay, this person is ready to ramp up for the new and changing workplace, and they're going to add value.
I think we try to add value as an institution of higher education is positioning, letting students know that from all different career paths, there are roles from marketing through design, through software development, engineering, usability. There are lots of different roles at all stages of deployment. So one of my colleagues introduced a book to me, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. And it's something, you know, Norman doors are things we encounter every day, but those are things that software engineers get very little experience in. So where I hope we can be of service and value as a university are things like that. My uncle, Kai-Fu Lee, gave a commencement talk a couple of years ago at Columbia. And part of that talk is very rah-rah, you know, you're Columbia engineers, you know, the world is your oyster and kind of thing. But some of that is, don't think so much about AI taking your job as about positioning yourself, sort of the Buckminster Fuller thought of what are you empowered and talented enough and creative enough to contribute, and where are you needed? And there are lots of places where we need diverse voices, and certainly that isn't the crux of the labor employment shortage in terms of what's going to change about jobs, and so definitely the idea that sort of jobs, is it actually what will it do to livable wages? What does it mean? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of things about universal basic income, for example. There's a UBI debate, and you hear the voice of, you know, Elon Musk and a lot of people a lot about UBI and so on. But I think underlying that is what jobs are actually getting taken away. What jobs? It's a very privileged perspective to say that you know, there are these working class jobs or jobs that are best done by machines, and that, you know, if it's taking away a living wage from a human being. But at the same time, it is about what is re-education? What are the opportunities? How can we make that re-education low cost, affordable, or free to people able and willing to take that retraining? And we consider that our mission in terms of outreach and in terms of social contribution. And so that's what, as a professional society, we try to teach our students to do.
That's fantastic. I feel like we're definitely going to have more conversation and break down, like, you know, just the world of artificial intelligence and how it definitely can be of benefit to the varieties of communities. So I hope I have a chance to reach back out and talk to both of you. It's been fantastic. So I don't know if you have any final words that you'd like to share, but I'll give you this chance and then we'll wrap up.
I think from the K-State student perspective, look for organization like Dr. Shu's, look for opportunities to get involved. I think that's the biggest thing, is to just look for those opportunities, stay open, and continue educating yourself even after you graduate.
Thank you, Jael. We want to be learners as much as we are teachers of these things. We want to, we need to learn, and it's a two-way street in terms of outreach. So part of our mission is recruiting. As a alumni director, Jessica, you have a unique role in terms of bridging the students of present and past and future. We would like to get introductions to students that will be the energetic sort of student body of the future, and you know, members of the club and leaders of the club in future years.
Sounds great. We can work on that. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate both of you for giving your time. I look forward to talking to you more. Please tune in for more on K-State Culturally. We've got some really great information that's coming down the pipeline. Have a great day.
Thank you.